Hi from Falmouth Uni. Welcome to Battles with Bits of Rubber.
What are you laughing about?
I'm laughing about the terrible webcam on this laptop. It's just appalling. How are you?
I'm okay. You do look a little green.
It's weird, isn't it? It's so odd. So should we call this one Passes with Bits of Brother?
Absolutely. Passes with bits of brother, bullet points. There we go.
And the reason we call it that was because I was being a bit flash, and we recorded a 2 and a nearly 3 hour podcast, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to put it through Microsoft Word as a thing where it will turn audio into text. We just let it run, and it did like 62 pages of text. I was like, oh cool, we can just pin through that and just check things. And then I noticed it's little Passes with Bits of Brother. I thought
AI has got a ways to go.
But I think it's a great title. So this was our visit to Falmouth, which we recorded a 2.5 hour, nearly 3 hour podcast. And basically I split it into two because there's two very distinct parts. The first part, which was much longer than I remembered.
That was a great day.
It was 1 hour and 40 before Neill showed up. And then we chatted for another hour with Neill. So they were two very distinctively different chats, but they were great, weren't they? It was such a nice day.
Yeah, very engaging group. They've got good bunch. It's a great program. Seriously, you guys have easily two of the top makeup effects programs in the world, I think, at Falmouth and Bolton.
Well, you said that to them, and I think they were quite taken about it. And it's true, you know, when you send a lot of places, you see people doing it right. And it was a really, really nice chat. Listening to it again, going through it, because it had been a few weeks since we'd done it. It was lovely to sort of pick up points and things that things that people were saying. And I remember going through the Everett Burrell letter that I wrote to Optic Nerve when I was at college, and we dug out that letter. I need to put that maybe in the notes. I need to find that.
Because
pictures of it.
That his response with the discussion is still ongoing.
Yeah, about how digital and practical.
The gist of the letter was that people are saying, "Oh, CGI is gonna take everybody's jobs and it's gonna wreck the industry."
Yeah,
it didn't, and it's not going to. And people are still saying, "Oh, AI and CGI are gonna take away people's jobs and gonna replace actors," and it's not. It may shuffle things around, but if anything, it's going to increase jobs because it's new technology that people will need to learn how to deal with.
Yeah, and I think that's something we found. We were trying to do our presentation. How difficult it was to get across the technical aspects of a very fragmented digital industry. Can I speak for digital industry? There's no one thing that's digital. It's lots of different pieces of software, and they work with different ways. And the thing is, scanning brings the practical reality of physical objects into the digital world and back and forth because you can print them. So you need to be literate in both of those areas, really. So
yeah, well, just in the last few days, I had surgery on my hand on Friday. Here's my bandage.
Nice.
I'm gonna be able to take all this padding off tomorrow and just put a Band-Aid over the incision. But I have been using my hand far more than I probably should have. But it hasn't had any pain at all, except when I try to straighten my middle finger back a little bit too much, then it hurts.
Right.
But no pain at all where I was sliced open, which I find
you
cool.
videoed it, didn't you?
I did. I videotaped the whole thing. It was quite cool. I posted just a short piece of it on Instagram because it was too long for me to post the entire thing. It was like 16 minutes from start when they stuck the needle in to numb up my hand to wrapping it with the bandage after they did the stitches.
So Tom is not squeamish, we've learned.
Yeah, no, it's pretty sweet. But anyway, the last few days I've been throwing stuff away. I've probably thrown away close to 1,000 pounds of silicone and stone and epoxy molds that I haven't used in years, and just making space. And it's
Wow.
it's amazing how much room I have now because I'm getting rid of all this stuff.
How's
But
it
it
feel?
made me real. I feels great. You know, I feel released. But it's cool because if all this was digital, I wouldn't have to be. It's been a good exercise, but I wouldn't have to be throwing out all this stuff because digital files don't take up any space.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. It's a nice feeling.
And some of the pieces I'm throwing away, you know, these big molds with flanges and all this stuff. It's like, fuck, I can just do this in ZBrush now.
Well, I do think, I mean, because obviously when you print stuff, you do obviously still have to have physical objects, you know, molds and things. But what I've noticed is when I do the digital workflow, my garbage bin just doesn't fill up nearly as quickly.
Yeah.
Because you end up printing exactly what you want, you know, rather than having to overbuild and then cut things back.
Our trash service is probably going to be a little pissed at me in the next couple of weeks. I filled up we have 2 trash bins, 3, 1 for recycling and 2 for trash. And I filled them both up with molds last week. And I'm going to more than fill up 2 of them this week. So it's gonna be a while before I can get rid of everything. I've got a stack of stuff I still have by the door ready to go out to the bins.
Yeah, and I think
they're probably thankfully the truck has this automatic arm that comes down and picks up the bins and picks it up and flips it, because otherwise the trash guys would be going, "What the fuck is this guy doing?" Because
their bodies
weigh 300 or 400 pounds a piece.
And that's going to be, you know, that's going to be an increasingly difficult circle to square, that, isn't it? A lot of this is all landfill. You can't recycle that stuff. So that's not something that's going to be sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, no, that makes me feel a little bad, but
yeah. But what can you do once it exists? You can't just keep it forever and throw it away. When I was thinking about, we mentioned in the podcast episode about this particular episode of Fangoria, edition of Fangoria, that mentioned the optic nerve article that discussed the use of computers to design stuff. And I found that I spent ages trying to find it, and I found it on Fangoria's own page, and it is number 99, Fangoria number 99 in 1990, and I've got it here, and I've got a screen grab of the page.
That's cool.
I remember it says 2 guys with a lot of nerve, and that's when they started Optic Nerve, Everett Burrell and John Bullich. And,
that was back in my visual effects days.
Yeah, well, that's cool,
because it was right at the very beginning of digital visual effects. 1990 was kind of the beginning of it all.
Well, I mean, it's lovely that was
very
the same
close
time.
to it anyway.
Yeah, because I remember you talking about Babylon 5, and that was Adrian Rigby and I both gone on set, because I'd written to Dick Smith. I mentioned this in the talk in the first part. I think I'd written to Dick Smith because I was trying to write my dissertation about digital effects on filmmaking, and what, you know, this was in 94 I'd written this, and then before that, 93 I think. Anyway, he got back to me and he sent me a list of all these shops. So one of them was Optic Nerve, who just they're not long been open. And I reached out to them and they got back to me. And when I came out, they were like, "Yeah, come on over, we'll show you around." And it was amazing.
John Vulich was a really neat guy.
Oh, well, I met him. I did meet him on set, and he was doing touch-ups on the Peter Jurassic makeup that he wore in Babylon 5.
Yeah.
And they were filming some stuff. We spent the day with them, and it was just incredible. It was Greg Funk. So it was Greg Funk that showed us around for the day. Greg Funk and Fiona Cush were there, and they showed us around all day. We had a look at everything. We went around the workshop first, and then
there's a couple of names I haven't heard in a while.
Oh, I think he's still going, still doing stuff, but I haven't spoken to him. I think Adrian Rigby has. But I wish, remember the day was just like magic. Like, we got shown around a workshop, we got taken on set, we spent the day on set, we were in the makeup trailer watching, you know, makeups getting touched up and removed at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We had lunch.
That's when
there.
they were in
Magical.
Sequest DSV was happening at the same time also that they were involved with.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing time, you know, all that kind of stuff going on. And I remember the digital sequences, the opening sequences of Deep Space Nine, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that was all kind of new, because that was all like the new series of Star Trek, and the whole introduction with a completely digital intro, as I recall. You know, it was just magical, all this computer stuff was coming out and no one was quite sure where it was going. You had these two guys using an Amiga, whatever it was, to design these zombie makeups. And
yeah, no,
it was incredible.
that's what my video toaster was running on, an Amiga.
Right.
And I wish I still had it, because it was an incredible machine.
Yeah.
And the video toaster had Lightwave 3D, which was what they were doing Babylon 5, and I know they were doing Sequest using Lightwave for their 3D modeling software.
Well, that was the software I remember hearing about, but I didn't really have any involvement with it. I didn't really use any of that stuff because, like you say, it's more for animation stuff. So I'm excited about the fact that I remember hearing about Lightwave, but I never really used it for anything. So,
and it's still around. I have I think I've got version 10, but I was probably one of the first 100 people in the country to use Lightwave.
Awesome. It's amazing, man. This stuff runs deep, and it's interesting to see how a lot of that still, like, as you say, it's still going on, and there's still a connection. But I love the fact that now, there's not so much of a separation between the digital world and the practical world.
No, it's neat. It's almost come full circle
again. Yeah. It's amazing. So I've got a few bullet points here I made of the talk from the first part of the talk. I know you did some too. So I started off with we talked a little about you did your great story about the Silicon Graphics machine thing, and I put a link to that in there as well. How things started out, and then obviously Silicon Graphics kind of didn't succeed.
Yeah, it was
as PCs kind of went past.
The Jack Pierce caveat. If you don't adapt, and I guess the Marine Corps got to say, improvise, overcome, adapt. I've got them probably out of order, but
how the hell are we supposed to know what kind of
improvise, you overcome, you adapt?
If you don't go with the flow, you're gonna get left out in the cold, and that's what happened to Jack Pierce.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about that, and then we were talking about we covered how having a brief is a very important thing, and obviously when you're doing your own projects, you set your own brief, and that can be a poison as well as a gift, because in theory you can do anything you like, and I found a lot of people flounder when they're not contained. And we all sort of mentioned a little bit about how important it is to be limited, not have a limited palette, because that actually then forces you to focus and concentrate, and it allows you to disregard a whole bunch of other options because they're not.
Well, I think that's one of the things that is so daunting for people who've never used ZBrush before, when they first launch the program and see all of this stuff that you can focus and know that most of the stuff that you see there on the interface you'll never use at all. And it's a great time to get a little tunnel vision, so you can block all that stuff out and know that you only have a few tools that are going to be essential for you to do what you need. And it just makes it so much easier than to focus on getting the job done. Yeah,
we did. And then interestingly, we went away from digitals and we were talking about how miniatures are fun, like the joy of miniatures, actual physical miniatures.
Yeah.
And how what's interesting is obviously you could make things digitally and then print them in miniature, but it's interesting when you're in front of a model, like a scale model, the effect it has on people, it's quite strange. And that only happens in the real world, where you have a physical object in front of you and you can stand and see it. And one of the things that I've always been quite interested in, I bought a book about it about this time last year. I've still not had a chance to dig in and make anything, was those like little penny theater mechanical machines, Victorian.
Oh yeah,
things you put a coin in and it would operate a little clockwork thing.
Automatons.
Yeah, that's right. And you'd end up with like a little, a little dude in bed.
Yeah.
And then like a ghost, he'd fall asleep, and then a ghost would come in, and then the fireplace would jump around and the door would close and all that kind of stuff. Or a burglar trying to crack a safe, and then a policeman comes in and catches him, and just silly little scenes like that. And how much fun that would be to make a digital, sculpt up those or make. But when you're stood in front of a miniature that somebody's made, it's so cool because it's this little thing. And it's endlessly fascinating. And you might not be interested in model making, but if you've ever been, I got... My eldest son is autistic, and when he was much younger, we used to go to these model train fairs.
Yeah,
and they were full, absolutely crammed of people.
Oh, they're amazing, and I'm, I have a koi pond in the backyard now because I don't have enough room in the house to put up a train. My miniatures, all my miniatures. So the koi pond has become my train set.
Yeah. Well, it's just
But the miniatures are, I like the scenics, you know, the streetscapes and so on. Probably more than I enjoy the trains, but you know, I like to do super detail them and weather them and do all this stuff. And it looks, if you photograph it, it looks authentic, especially if you can get it outside in the sunlight and line it up with trees in the background. It's fascinating. There's a technique that you can do photographically that's kind of fun. You can it's called tilt shift, where it's really narrow focus, and you shoot it with like a 12 to 15 frame per second frame rate. So when you look at it, it looks like you're looking at an actual miniature rather than real life.
Yeah, and it has, because that weird, that short depth of field.
The right focal length, the lens and so on, but you can get a really cool fake miniature look.
But what I find outstanding about that stuff is, like you were saying, I enjoy it too. I'm not particularly interested in train, but my son was, and it was full. Well, it was full of like mad looking old dudes who smelled of earwax with like crazy hair, and because they don't really care how they look, they're just obsessed with their, you know, with the trains and everything, the little things and miniatures. But they were so lovingly recreated, and the amount of time and effort. But you couldn't believe it was crammed. There were thousands and hundreds and thousands of people that would go to these things, and it was always fully attended. Like, it was standing room only. It was incredible. The love that people have for these things. It's not until you're in front of a miniature. It's not something you can really capture in a photograph. You have to be in front of it to see
there's
the little things.
A model train store here in Denver called Caboose Hobbies, which is, they've got all kinds of dioramas inside, and they have, you know, Z scale and N gauge and HO and O, which is like, you know, Lionel train and big garden railroads. But HO scale, which is 1/84th scale, is the largest, most widely modeled scale in the world. And Caboose Hobbies does more online business than all of the Gap stores in the United States combined.
I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it?
You go in there on a weekend and you'll see license plates from Idaho, from Wyoming, from Montana, from Nevada. It's crazy. People come literally from states away to shop at Caboose Hobbies because it's such a fucking amazing store.
And it's interesting to me that so many people love this stuff. And it is, like I say, miniature. You used to see miniatures. I remember seeing, like, you know, the model castle stuff from Harry Potter and things, you know, and when you know, when they used to still make models for films, and but the effect it has on the viewer to be in front of this physical object that's a small version, it's quite amazing. And it does. I remember seeing like waxwork when I was a kid, you know, that the effect it had on you to see this thing that, you know, wasn't real, but was made to look real, that was right in front of you. And it's weird because you're in front of it, you're interacting with it, you know, you can move around it and look at it, and it's just. And I love that about practical stuff, you know, and I love the fact that you could do some things digitally and then print them, so you could work in both worlds, you know. I think that's lovely.
Well, that's what's so cool about Amelia Rowcroft's work, because she sculpted for Tussauds Museum, and the classes that she teaches online are incredible, and her likenesses are better than anybody's ever seen.
Yeah. And again, she puts life into those things, and it's just, you know, it's a piece of clay, but she makes it alive, and it is incredible. That whole sculptural thing of being able to transform something and make it come alive and give it expression and emotion, and to manipulate people's feelings that way with a physical object. And that doesn't matter what medium you're doing it in, you know, you still need to be able to tap inside of that in the brain. And we were talking a bit about that today with prosthetics in this course I was teaching today, about how, you know, how it's nice to do subtle makeups, how you can make somebody look a bit more sinister or a bit more sympathetic or whatever by modifying their face, by giving them a bigger forehead or wider ears, or you know, physical actual modifications you would make in order to enhance a character. And why does it have that effect on us? It's odd, because you need a bit of psychology as well to figure out, if I do this, what. And sometimes you don't really know what the effect is. You just look through, you know, lots of pictures, and you see a picture of somebody, you think, oh, they look really sad or whatever, and it's trying to analyze why do they look sad? What is it about their face, and how can I bring that out and enhance it and increase it?
Or just completely changing somebody. It's one of the things that fascinates me about the clandestine services that have makeup all do this stuff. And, you know, a simple wig change, changing the color of the hair, length of the hair, a different nose are enough to render somebody unrecognizable to people that know that person.
Yeah. And I think it's fascinating how you can make, and we've talked about this before, how you can make those very economic changes to get the maximum amount of effect. Rather than piling somebody a load of rubber, it's more about choosing the right features to change the right amount. And it needn't be a big thing. It's making wise choices. And I think that's something you see
the
as
the thinner, the better, because then you get the emoting from the actual face through the prosthetic is going to be more genuine than if you're, you know, putting a half a centimeter of additional rubber on somebody's face, then it just isn't going to be that movable.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you work, you know, with actors that will do things like wear the right kind of shoe to give them the right kind of gait. And there's 101 little tricks that they'll bring to the party as well. And that's lovely when you work, you know, in a department, when you get to see all these different little things that all work together to just pull something together that you might not necessarily notice, but it's very good when you get character actors like that. I think it might be quite difficult for really, really famous actors. Like if you get someone like Tom Cruise, like no matter what he does, it's going to like Tom Cruise pulling an affectation. So if he's supposed to be like an SS officer, it's him doing a, you know, like a kind of a funky accent, or it doesn't, you don't really believe it's him. Whereas if it's like, if it's like in England, like Stephen Graham or someone like that, like a character actor that's well known, but they're also not like international megastars. So they can realistically be a chef or a depressed school teacher or whatever, and you kind of believe it because, you know, you wouldn't believe Tom Cruise as a sad sack geography teacher, or do you know what I mean? So
right.
It's amazing how all of that stuff comes together, and that's why makeup's such an important part of that, because it really helps people feel differently when they look differently, and that's why
there are a couple of actors here in Denver that I work with fairly regularly who love wearing prosthetics, and it's so much fun to have them in the chair. As you start putting the pieces on, they start finding the character themselves and with vocal affectations and mannerisms, and it's really great to see the character come alive as they transform physically. And
it's just this whole collaborative thing, isn't it, of just you know, working with them to make something. Oh, it's so cool. It's very exciting. So I guess without further ado, we should probably get stuck into the first part of our chat with Falmouth. So here we are.
Happy to be here. Very happy to be here. I was here in 2021 with the first group of students going through this program, and we had a great time. We talked about all kinds of stuff.
You were making eyeballs.
Yeah, and I actually brought, I've refined the process, and it's in the book. And one of the things that I have changed from how I present things in the book is I'm no longer embarrassed to present my failures, which a lot of people don't do. And you know, you see all these Instagram posts of people's gorgeous work, but there's no context to what you're seeing. You don't know how long it took them to achieve this, how long it took to sculpt, how many failures they had in the molding and casting process, how many times they fucked up the paint job. All you see is this finished piece with no context, and you go, God, I'm going to quit my work and get a job at Chick-fil-A. I'll never be good enough to do this. Well, sure, you can be that good, just you can't judge yourself on the merits of somebody else's work because you don't know the context. And what somebody else does doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
It's all about what you want to do, how much you are willing to invest in getting there, and not letting anything deter you from that path. You know, I grew up with World War II. My parents were kids in the Depression, so you get a job, make a living, and you stick with a job, and you follow your passion. That's for hobbies. That's bullshit. Follow your passion from the get-go, right out of the gate, and the money will follow. And that's icing on the cake. If you want to do this because you want to become rich and famous, do something else, because you're just wasting everybody else's time trying to do this. It's not about fame or money. It's about being an artist, about doing this because you can't not do it. That's why we do anything, because I can't not do something.
Yeah.
I am a maker. That is my nature. I've got to do something all the time, whether it's digging a koi pond in my backyard or putting up Christmas lights that are in my backyard year round. I have to do something all the time that is creative and artistic. Maybe it only satisfies me, but that's how I have to approach my life.
Yeah, I think this can be such a difficult business. In a way, you have to really love it, because it's that passion for the work that gets you through the more difficult times with this kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's not as if we haven't just been through some difficult times. People are still struggling to get out from under the pandemic, and with the SAG strike and the writers' strike, there are people who have lost their homes already, and will continue to dig out from under this mess, because it's a, I don't want to say trickle down, but it's a cascade effect that it's going to take a while before what happened in the States gets to here and things get back to normal, because you're feeling the pain of what our actors and writers have just been through. And it's going to take some time to get through that. And I think one of the big fears now that is all over social media is, how's AI going to affect us? Personally, I don't think it will. But that's not what we want to talk about today. That's because I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime. It will make our jobs easier. It's not going to replace anybody.
Yeah, I don't think we really even know yet what the implications of that are going to be. And I think it's
other than Skynet.
Yeah, that's right. Worldwide apocalypse. Other than that, I think as long as people want to be creative and make things, then there'll always be that human element, and that's a lot of what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And what a lot of the conversation is now is about, how we kind of navigating this new territory of, changing the way we're doing things. This digital revolution. So.
Yeah, and that I think is the discussion that we need to have, and that nobody is really having. There's discussion about digital sculpting and 3D scanning and 3D printing and how is that affecting things, but there have been no definitive answers. I don't know that there are any definitive answers, but in terms of digital inflicting itself and becoming part of our practical makeup effects world, that ship has already sailed. It's not coming back to port. Digital is part of what we do now. And you can either embrace it and grow with the industry, or be left in the dust like Jack Pierce was, who refused to accept new materials. He would build up collodion and cotton stuff for Frankenstein's monster. Every day he would build up that makeup, and Jack refused to grow and embrace new processes and new materials, and it killed him in the business. And he was such a pioneer.
I think the thing with a lot of the changes and innovations and the sort of stuff that you guys will be talking about at the event as well, and what we sort of encourage the students to embrace on this course is digital sculpting and 3D printing and all those processes. But the thing is, those things are actually fun. Like it is fun to kind of, now we've got the ability to do things that we can't do practically, and just even things that make the process easier. Something as simple as having symmetry in ZBrush and not having to sort of sit there and eyeball the other side of the sculpt. I mean, they're things that just, make the whole process more accessible. And it's early days for a lot of the guys here, but they're all getting on board with learning ZBrush, and some people are enjoying it, some people are not enjoying it so much at the moment, but I'm sure by the end of the year, I totally expect that all of these guys will be using it one way or the other.
Well, all three of us started ZBrush about the same time.
Absolutely.
And we hated it.
Yeah, it took me 10 years to make.
We hated it at first, and it's like,
why?
why can I not figure this out? Because if you look at the interface of ZBrush, it's daunting, and you open that brush menu, it's like, holy crap, what are all these brushes?
Yeah.
Well, you only need maybe 5 of them to do everything.
It's very
you want
analogous
to be able to do.
to
It's
real
very
sculpting,
analogous.
right?
Yeah,
You know?
When the notes that I've done for this talk, the analogy that occurred to me is like going to a supermarket, like a big supermarket will have maybe 50,000 products in there. You're going to go in there and buy the same 60 you always buy, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't throw you
That's
off
it.
that there are
That's
15
it.
different kinds of cereal that you're not going to try
Yeah.
because you don't want them. You go, I can't go in there. So, but if you've never seen a supermarket, if you've been thawed out from, having a block of ice, you might lose your shit. But you'd be like, oh, it's just a bunch of stuff I don't want. I just go in there for the things I want and then leave.
Of course, yeah.
And it's exactly the same as ZBrush.
Yeah.
That's what I realised. I was like, oh, I can ignore it. And suddenly it's not that bad a problem. And then what will happen is I'll learn. Someone will say, oh, did you try the Delta contrast brush? I'm like, the what? So yeah, it just punches it in the
I just learned about that yesterday.
Oh, and so you just add another little notch to your, it's like, okay.
It's just a tool.
It is just a tool.
It's still all about the operator.
Yeah.
It's just a tool.
And I think the problem is as well that if you don't do it enough, you kind of get distracted by the thing itself. And that's why I think a lot of ZBrush sculptures look the same, because everyone's just using the surface level of stuff. And it's kind of like, if you gave everyone a really nice camera, someone's going to take better pictures than somebody else. You've got the same camera.
That's right.
So it's not the camera, it's where you put yourself, it's the mood, it's the lighting, it's the story you're trying to tell, and that's got nothing to do with the lens.
Have you found that your sculpting style has changed when you started digital sculpting, or as you've gotten better and better at digital sculpting, that your sculpting style has changed from what it is practically?
Definitely.
Because I sometimes feel because we're looking at the sculpt in a totally different way, in this 2.5D kind of format, and you're zooming right in, and you realise that you can use those sculpting tools or brushes in a different way, your sculpting style starts to change. Maybe that's why it does become a bit homogenous.
I think in a lot of ways, digital sculpting, for me, enhances the process. It makes it a little bit easier for me, because if I'm sculpting something, a full head, character head in wet clay on an armature, and I want to look at it upside down to get a different perspective on it, wet clay's heavy. It weighs a ton. I run the risk of dropping it and having to start all over or do a major repair job. In ZBrush, I can just look at it in any orientation I want, and because we are always looking at everything in our world with lighting from above, and that's when you put the flashlight, or the torch as you call them, under your chin and light up, it looks more sinister, it looks creepier, because you're seeing something familiar lit from below instead of from above. So if you're working on a nose, you might look at it in normal orientation and that nose looks fine, but you turn it upside down and you say, oh, this nostril wing is way bent out of shape.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but I didn't run the risk of dropping it and ruining my sculpture by doing that. So in that sense, ZBrush is wonderful.
Yeah, and I think as well, the other thing that only occurred to me recently was like that sculpting digitally is basically, it's like having a blanket that you pull and push.
Yeah.
It's not like clay where you add a lump and tear a chunk out. It's not. And that's what real sculpting is. In the same way that carving in marble is like reductive. You start with a block and you reduce. You can't add, you can only reduce.
Yeah.
So once you kind of get your head around that, then you stop noticing that as a thing, and you focus on what the shape is. And I think that's the thing with digital sculpting. You kind of need to get used to it enough that you focus on the sculpting and not the interface.
And then it becomes second nature, just like what you would do with clay. You can now do with ZBrush when you put it in the wireframe mode to see the polygons, and you stretch them out. Well, it's not going to deform the same way now. If you need to pull out those stretched polygons, you have to do something to it. So, Z-remesher or Dynamesh can fix all of those problems.
We just did our last lesson, our most recent lesson was on Dynamesh. So these guys, their first lesson started with Core Mini, just to kind of get used to the interface. Because, like, just a quick show of hands here, like, I know you can't see this on radio, but how many people had never done any digital sculpting? So there's a lot, right?
Almost everybody.
So it was really about, the very first lesson is learning the language of 3D. I mean, Stuart, you and I talked about this, and I've talked to you as well, Todd, about this. It's like, there's a language that comes with 3D modelling. And so the first lesson is really trying to understand that.
And that feels like a really intrusion to sculpture when you
Yeah,
start.
it does.
Like even yesterday, we were going like, oh, that's because your stuff was triangular, you need quads. I was like, oh, fuck all that.
which is strange.
I was like, oh,
Because
but
every scanner records the scan data in triangles instead of quads. And that's because all 3D scanners that we are starting to use now in makeup effects were designed by engineers for scanning mechanical parts, for engine blocks and car bodies and stuff like that. Maybe some next generation scanners will start to take artistic considerations into effect, that knowing that for 3D animation and for 3D sculpting, you need to have quad polygons instead of triangles, because curvatures in triangles, when you go to smooth them out, they don't smooth out the way quads do. Yeah. And everything needs, and certain operations in ZBrush will not do that. They say, I'm not going to do that because this is triangles.
Yeah, and if you come from a makeup effects background, the last thing that you're interested in is topology. You know what I mean? But it is part of the language of, as you say, moving into this, 3D realm. And so, slowly but surely, that's what these guys are doing, is they're learning that language and they're adapting to these new tools. Well, I say new tools, but they're not new tools. They've been around for a long time.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, they're new to us, I think.
I love that you guys are doing this, and I want to say kudos to all of you for being in probably one of the 3 best effects programs in the world.
Wow, that's a big compliment.
I believe that.
Yeah, thank you.
And 2 of them are in the UK.
Yeah, I think this is definitely...
Yes. But we're expecting a lot of pushback at the Prosthetics Event.
Can I just say
with our top...
Yeah, about the ZBrush thing as well. I realise the amount of times we say ZBrush, now you're being paid by ZBrush. I'm using ZBrush because that's what everyone seems to be using, and so if I need help, there's plenty of tutorials on it. I'm aware that Mudbox exists. I'm aware that Nomad, I have Nomad Sculpt on my iPad.
Blender.
And Blender, I haven't used Blender, but I should learn Blender.
It's a free program like Nomad, but it's my background is visual effects, animation. I was decades doing that stuff on Batman and Robin for Joel Schumacher. That V was Contact, My Favorite Martian. I was just doing all 3D animation stuff, and my digital packages were Maya, 3D Studio Max, and Lightwave, which are still used in the industry. But that's animation stuff. Yeah. And ZBrush models can be taken into other programs and articulated and animated in those programs, but it doesn't. Those things don't apply to us. But the language is the same. A Boolean is still a Boolean. They have different terminology for certain things. The interfaces are all different, but functionality is the same across the board.
Because I guess it's dealing with geometry, isn't it?
Yeah.
So those are certain rules that it has to do. But what I was going to say about the ZBrush thing is that I'm also a bit annoyed that they've moved over. Like I had ZBrush 10 years ago when it was owned by Pixelogic. Yeah. I could have it on a laptop and a desktop. I had a perpetual license. Yeah. I paid like 650 quid for it 10 years ago, which was a lot of money for it. Yeah. But, if you were designing aircraft, you'd be paying thousands a month for CAD. So it's not that bad, actually. But then it's changed hands. Now it's owned by Maxon. They stop you using on 2 machines. You have to register. So I can see how they've suddenly fucking got the sculpting industry by the balls. And if they want to, they can be utter twats about it. So I would encourage everybody to learn how to use Blender too. because I think it's going to be useful to know more than one, because I kind of refuse to be hemmed in. Everything goes through them, then they go, let's just crank this
And
up.
I'm stuck in 2022 with ZBrush. I am not going to the dark side.
I did. But I still got 22.
But I can do everything I need to do with 2022. You know, most of the upgrades to ZBrush since Maxon has bought it all pertain to animation.
Yeah.
And I don't give a shit about animating anymore. I mean, I love it, but that's what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah. But I feel a little bit nervous about it. In the same way where you get places that will not take cash. And it's a little bit like, I use a card all the time, but I don't think you should get rid of cash.
Yeah.
Like if you issue that as an edict, I'm now suspicious of your motives. You know what I mean? If nobody's using it, then there won't be any fucking cash. You don't have to stop it from existing. Do you see my point? So let it exist if it wants to exist, and it seems like that with ZBrush. So I think ZBrush is good because everyone's using it, but part of me is worried where Maxon could get. They could get a bit big for their boots and go, "Oh, we're going to start. What are you going to do? Not buy it? You're in there now. You've got to do it." Whereas no one's like, you know. There isn't like a clay council that will come around and check whether or not you're using the right kind of clay. That's kind of what they're doing. So
that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's definitely. I mean, this course we consider this a hybrid course, and that was really Neill's original vision for the MA at Falmouth. Is that we sort of just embrace all ways of making things, and I think Neill also is very conscious of, you know, the things that they're doing at Millennium. He wants the guys here in the school to be doing as well. But I think it's just about, you know, opening up the toolbox and just, you know, we're still really big on traditional techniques here. Clay, plaster, latex, silicone, it's all part of it still.
And none of that stuff's going away.
That's right, you know, and I think by and large, a lot of the students that are here still wanted to join the course so they can get their hands dirty, you know, and I think that it's just lovely to be able to have the option of both, really.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I quit visual effects animation is because I've always been a tactile artist.
Yeah.
I like to touch the stuff I'm working on, and with visual effects at the time, it was all in the computer, and I still love CGI, but now with scanning and 3D printing and ZBrush, oh, that's my wife. Hi. Well, it always elicits a laugh.
Hey, can I just ask?
Yeah, but I still, now with all the 3D stuff, I can still do my CGI, but I can print it out, and now I can hold what I was working on in the computer. So it's the best of both worlds for me.
Yeah. Can I ask you guys something? You mentioned it before, you touched on it before, because I know you have this really interesting subject, and you giving some examples of digital mold making, sculpting, and all that sort of stuff at the event. You said that you were expecting some pushback. In what way do you think you're going to have some pushback?
I think a lot of that pushback is going to be...
I noticed it in the comments already on my post.
is going to be that digital sculpting and 3D scanning and 3D printing are becoming part of this. And it's like, folks, don't shoot the messengers. You know, that ship has already sailed.
But is there really that much sort of opposition to it?
I think that most of the opposition is coming from people who have little to no experience in using these tools.
Yeah.
And all they know is pushing clay.
Yeah, I think there's a danger that you just feel like you drunk the Kool-Aid and everyone just thinks, oh, okay. Which is why I said about the ZBrush thing, because we keep talking about it. I want to make it clear, if there was an alternative, I would use it, but it's what's the standard that everyone knows, and that's what I learned. So, but I think it's smart to think
But
around
it all comes back down to it being nothing more than a tool.
Yeah.
You know, there are virtually no labs in LA any longer that are doing traditional life casting. They're all doing 3D scanning, and from a practicality standpoint, it really makes sense. Scanners can be expensive, but you don't have the messy materials to deal with. You're not smearing alginate or silicone all over an A-list actor's face and body. They're in and out in under 30 minutes, depending on what you need to scan, and they don't have to go home and take a shower because of it. And you have nothing physical to deal with. So Stuart on Rogue Heroes and The Power Stuart got the raw scan data that somebody scanned for him, and he didn't have time to do any of the cleanup on the models, sent the files to me in Colorado, where I cleaned up the scan, got them ready for printing out, sent the files back to Stuart. He printed the cores, made molds, and ran from there. And while I was doing all of that, he was free to work on other things.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes total sense.
Yeah. The pushback, I think, comes from, like you say, it's the people that, and I understand this because I am the same. You deify the process. You love the act of doing it. You don't want that taken away from you. And that's what it feels like. And I think that's the danger, which is why I encourage people to do it, because if you can do both, then, well, A, you're part of the conversation. You go, yeah, I do, but I don't like what it is. But also, you can decide when and not. Like, when I get a printer, the first thing I do is join a Facebook group. If something will go wrong, someone on that group will be able to help me do whatever. Invariably, I'll see a stupid question about making a mold, like a really simple question. And I'm like, that's so easy. I'm like, yeah, because that's what I do.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
It's like, so,
right.
and the thing about 3D printing is there are some things where you go like this thing, like these cores, and people are like, oh, you can print it solid if you want it thick. I'm like, well, I'll just print it really, really hollow, and then when it's done, I'll just fill it with resin and swirl it. And
great.
do that a couple
Great
times,
idea.
then top it up with Jesmonite, and now that's a solid block.
Yeah.
And it didn't cost me like 60 quid a litre of resin, obviously.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you don't do that, you wouldn't know what it got those materials in my workshop. So it's like,
That's
so it's just
right.
knowing what to pick and choose. If you don't speak the language, you can't play the game. So that's why I kind of did it. Mostly out of fear, because I was worried I felt I was going to get left behind. But actually, it's kind of like, oh, there's all this cool shit I can do. And I was making these molds for this thing because I worked mostly this year digitally, producing things and then sculpting on them and making molds. But I was like, oh, I can't show anyone any of that. So I'm gonna have to redo what I did so that I can show you what I've done, which is a lot of work. But the point is, I can show you exactly what I've done. And then invariably people go, well, this was a very inefficient one. So where the fuck were you when I was asking that question a year ago? That's exactly what I'm talking about it. So I would rather do it badly and then get pulled apart on it, because in a year from now, that'll be part of my canon. I'll be knocking it out of the park. So you've got to be prepared to make mistakes and do just like I did with materials. And what you're saying about scanning, like silicon ain't cheap and free. No one's like, if you have, if you have two artists that have to travel to an actor's home and put the plastic out, and then what am I going to do with these buckets of plaster water? You know, it probably costs you $1,000 to do a life cast.
Well, we were
you know what I mean? You do 7 of those, you paid for an iSound HD.
So we were talking about exactly that thing because, was it last week, guys? We did the life casting class. And so Neill and I did like a life cast, a head cast with silicone, plaster bandage, you know, the old school way. And, you know, we were talking about that thing of the days when you had to go to a hotel room or an actor's house and you had to carry all this stuff and you're worried about spilling something on their carpet and everything. So there's obviously some really simple, practical ways that scanning is completely, you know, made things more efficient and easier and happier for everybody. So there's a time to use, you know, there's always a time to use these different techniques, and it's just good to have it all available. So, but it's funny to me, Stuart, that you say that, you know, you did this out of, you pursued the digital side out of fear that, you know, you were going to be left behind. Because
that's how it started,
But I think now, and having been someone who's listened to this podcast a lot, you guys are really ahead of the game in some ways, you know.
Which goes to show you how little you need to know to fucking do it. That's my point.
Well,
it's not that hard. It really isn't. Because when I was making these molds, I was thinking like a mold maker. Once I'd gotten past the 8 tools I need on ZBrush, I was good to go.
And I think that's it. I think that, you know, a lot of what I hope that Neill and I can do for these guys on this course is we can just demystify that. And I think it's not about, you know, everyone's got to get on board, jump on the train, and, you know, everyone's got to be brilliant at digital. I think some artists will just never want that, and that's fine.
Well, that's kind of the gist of our presentation is, it's, you know, this is what's happening. We're putting it out there. You can go for it or not.
Yeah. Like, I mean, some people doing incredible stuff, like, you know, and, you know, there's a guy on Instagram that makes these incredibly beautiful, like, sci-fi helmets, and it's all traditional clay work, and they're just, you know, you would swear that they were done, you know, they were sculpted in ZBrush or another sort of...
I'm in awe of people who can
and it's
that
just
hard surface modeling with clay.
Yeah, but, I mean, no doubt he's built that skill set to the extent where he can do that almost as efficiently as he can with a digital pipeline. So I think it's just what you get good at and you can sort of pursue as part of your craft and as part of your workflow. I think, you know, whatever those ways of working are, I think that they're still completely valid. It's really about achieving that end result.
It's the end result.
Yeah.
You work backwards from there. And it's not about what can I do digitally. It's about, no, what's the end result?
Yeah.
What's the quickest, best way of doing that?
If Stuart and I have a mantra, it is, if we can do it, anybody can do it.
Well, I feel the same. That's what I tell these guys all the time. I mean, you know, if I can do this stuff, there's no reason that they can't do it and do it better. So, yeah, I think it's really just about, you know, giving everyone the confidence to have a go. And as you guys have said, a lot of the times it's the freedom to make mistakes because, I don't know, who here is afraid of making mistakes? Okay, everyone nervously put their hands up, right?
Get over that fear. If you don't screw stuff up, you don't really learn anything. You have to make mistakes in order to advance. This whole process of being an artist is you're supposed to feel uncomfortable about yourselves. You know, Stuart and I both suffer from imposter syndrome, thinking that we're going to get up in front of a bunch of people and start talking, and people are going to realize we don't know what we're talking about. So, you know, it's about working outside of your comfort zone until you get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And then push yourself outside of your comfort zone again until you get comfortable. It's the only way you're gonna keep improving is to keep getting outside your comfort zone until it gets comfortable. So embrace not feeling good about your work. You're not supposed. It's okay to not feel good about your work. I think that's natural for an artist. It's okay to think that your work is pretty good when it is, but you know you should always know that your work can always be better. Given better tools, better materials, more time, whatever it is, but it's always going to be a pursuit of improvement.
It's having that separate all your questions.
No, I was just going to say, it's interesting because from what I've learned so far, dipping my toes into the industry and learning about it, it's always about learning, regardless of how old you are, how long you've been in the industry, it's constantly learning, accumulating information and changing the way that you do things.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about the whole digital thing, and I'm sure you've all seen it of working in the industry for so long, the original fear of CGI, and how everybody was like, it's going to take our jobs, it's going to ruin our jobs.
That was a real
Tell
fear.
them about the letter you showed me yesterday.
Oh yeah, it's on my phone. It was a letter from. You guys have heard of Optic Nerve?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, Glenn Hetrick was part of Optic Nerve. John Vulich was one of the
Well,
original partners.
it was John Vulich and Everett Burrell.
Yeah.
Everett Burrell, I think, is still doing digital stuff.
Yeah.
He is a VFX supervisor.
Yeah.
Well, he started out with Optic Nerve. They started in 1987, I think.
Yeah.
And
I
John
met
passed on, didn't he?
Yeah, I met John in 1990
Yeah.
because they were using Lightwave on Babylon 5 and what was that one with the submarine that Roy Scheider was on? Sequest.
Yeah.
They were using Lightwave for that stuff, and Optic Nerve was doing their visual effects at the time.
Yeah.
But Stuart wrote Everett a letter.
Well, it originally started when I wrote my dissertation at college. So I graduated in 95. So in 94 I was writing, I called it From Camera to Keyboard, the Effects of Computer Use in Filmmaking. It was basically an analysis of, at the time, very early on, I don't think Toy Story had come out yet.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of before
very
that.
early days.
So you had like Jurassic Park and...
The Abyss Tentacle.
Huh?
The Abyss Tentacle.
Yeah, that's right.
What was the other one? No.
Well, after he tells this story, I've got one also about an analogy about what's happening in our industry versus the visual effects animation with silicon graphics computers.
Which no one's ever heard of now.
Which no one's ever heard of now, and I'll tell you why.
I remember those.
Yeah.
But Forrest Gump, you know, all those kind of digital things are in that.
Yeah.
And I was just interested in that. So I wrote to Dick Smith and said, because you could. And he wrote back and said, I don't know. But here's a bunch of people that might. And he gave me a list of shops in the States. And he said, you could speak to these. And when I finished college, I went to LA. So in 95, I went to LA for a month. to see what the industry was like, to see if it was a viable place to go. So before I went, I wrote to Everett Burrell, Optic Nerve, and again he wrote back. And he had this whole list about, because I'd seen an article in Fangoria, I've still got that episode of Fangoria edition.
Which one was it?
It was the one with Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead. They made a zombie movie and they designed all their characters digitally in coral paint.
I don't think I saw that one.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That
I've
was
never seen
Optic
anyone
Nerve,
do
right?
that, and everyone was mocking them.
That was Savini's Dawn of the Dead, wasn't it?
He did Night.
Night of the Living
remake
Dead, was it?
Night.
Night of the Living
About,
Dead?
about that time,
Yeah.
probably was.
Basically, he was saying, like, you know, that everyone was kind of mocking it. I'll put the letter in the presentation. I took a photo of it yesterday, and it's just like, you know, it's been going on for a while, and there's all these kind of people trying stuff out. And typically, if no one else is doing it, you're pushing out. It feels very lonely, so you have to be able to contend with it. The trouble is, as soon as everyone starts doing stuff, then you're just like everybody else. So if you want to stand out, you have to kind of go in a different way. But how many different ways are there? Do you know what I mean?
Well, Gordon Smith's kind of innovations with silicone prosthetics was a very
Did
similar
you read his
thing.
books? He's got 2 books out there.
I haven't read his books, but you know, it's well known that he was met with a lot of resistance at first.
Yeah.
And I think I remember being at the very first IMAPS maybe, and
Tom
he was
McLaughlin's got a good silicone book too.
but now it's just we totally accept it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting.
The point of the letter that Everett sent to Stuart, though, was the discussion that we're having now about digital taking away practical jobs. They were having in 1995 with Babylon 5. It hasn't changed.
Yeah, I mean, you can see from examples. I mean, Bradley, you worked on Lord of the Rings, for example. I think that still stands up as one of the best mergings of CGI and practical. They work so well hand in hand.
Yeah, well, that's when it's the best of both worlds, when you've got practical and digital helping each other rather than it's one or the other, and it's not that way at all. You know, and ask an actor. You know, nothing says real like real.
Yeah.
Ask an actor whether they would like to, you know, have a fully animatronic velociraptor on stage breathing into their face, or reacting to a tennis ball on the end of a C-stand on a green screen stage. There's no question of what they would prefer. But let me get to the silicon graphics. SGI, or silicon graphics, in the late 80s, early 90s. The early 90s was really when the CGI boom hit real visual effects in motion pictures and television. And silicon graphics, with their own proprietary operating system called IRIX, they were the only name in the game. If you weren't running SGI computers, you were a complete amateur. You know, they had, and they're wicked expensive machines because they were the only ones that could handle animation. And at the time, you know, 3D scanning has been around since the 1960s. 3D printing has been around since the 1980s, but it wasn't until 1990, 91 when computers had enough power and memory to be able to handle the file sizes of that technology that it became a thing. So Silicon Graphics was doing all of the animation for The Tentacle and the Abyss, and you know, all of these movies. Well, I'd been in LA for about 12 years and decided I got to get out of LA before I become a complete asshole.
Yeah.
So the Northridge earthquake in '94 was the icing on the cake, and we were out of there, and we moved back to Colorado. And the only reason we could do visual effects from from Colorado with companies in Los Angeles is because I had all of these years of experience. And that was the time when the only way you could digitally transfer files was if you had a T1 line in your office or your home, which is a really expensive telephone way of transferring files. So we would overnight files to the studios, to Warner Brothers or MGM or whatever we were working on at the time. And we were looking into upgrading our computer system. And we're looking at SGIs going, motherfucker. And at the time, PCs were starting to get powerful. And Intergraph was a name at the time. They don't
they don't exist anymore because Silicon Graphics bought Intergraph in the mid-90s because they saw what they were doing, but they didn't take it far enough. We realized we could buy 2 screaming Intergraph machines for a little less than the price of 1 SGI computer.
Wow. Yeah.
And we'd be sending reels to studios to bid on effects projects for different things, and they say, well, what platform are you running on? We're running on PC, and I said, they just scoffed at us. Well, Silicon Graphics never ported any of their stuff to PC. They bought some PC, they bought Intergraph, they bought a couple of other companies, but they still kept running their IRIX systems. They bought Intergraph basically to kill it.
Yeah, right.
And Silicon Graphics no longer exists because they were the Jack Pierce of computers.
But see, that's a huge hubris on their part. Because,
Big time.
Because what they're thinking is, oh, there's a thing that does the thing that we know you want, so we're going to build this wall of a paywall around it. Not thinking, we'll just go, well, fuck it, we'll go over there and do something different. And then that will grow around it. And suddenly this thing isn't being used anymore. And I think that's the thing with a lot of stuff. It's like the desire to create stuff will overcome that. Because people still want to make stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
can't afford a 20 grand computer.
No.
It's not going to happen. So, you know what I mean? It's a stupid argument because it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big sort of theme here is adaptability, and it's just a quality that I think, whether you're new to the business or you've been in the business a long time, that, keeping the opportunity to be creative, keeping the opportunity to work on projects professionally or whether they're for your own enjoyment, being adaptable is an important thing, is an important quality, and it's something that students here, they value the chance to be adaptable. They want that resilience in their careers to cultivate that quality.
Well, we at the 2021 TPE, we sat down with Jake Garber, and Jake said, the more you can do,
I remember that. Yeah.
The more you get to do.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be more true. The Marine Corps has a motto: improvise, overcome, adapt.
Yeah, it's very true, and I think it's why it's so relevant for so many students that are going through courses like this, is because they're all, they want to know what areas they can specialise in. They want to know what opportunities exist for them. They want to know where's the entry point for me to get into the movie business or into makeup effects or whatever it is, and just having that willingness to adapt, that willingness to have a go at anything, I think is a big part of entering the business and seeing what opportunities arise out of that willingness to be open and to be adaptable. So I don't know. What do you guys think? What is it?
Well, we were talking when we were walking around the shop before we came in here. That Bill Corso has started a company called Digital Makeup Group, where there's very little that is, you see it in the theater or on TV now, makeup-wise, that hasn't had some digital tweaking.
Yeah.
And Bill started DMG solely for the purpose of having makeup artists be the ones who do the digital compositing for these makeup tweaks rather than a visual effects artist. Brad made the good argument that, who knows color correction better than a colorist doing visual effects compositing. We have to, as visual effects animators, we got to know that stuff too. But I also understand Bill's argument with it, and it's yet another area where perhaps you haven't even given consideration to that being something you could pursue once you finish the course.
But I also find that there are problems that have to be solved digitally because of the pursuit of the fidelity of the image. So now you have such high definition cameras, you now see the wig lace.
That's
you
right.
You wouldn't have seen the wig lace before. So now we've got to spend a ton of money fixing that in post.
Or just,
purely because the lens
one
permits us that access.
That's sticking out against a dark background, and it's very distracting because it's an emotional scene, and all you see is this one hair that looks kind of like a pube.
But that you can fix. But if everything's perfect, the wig lace is visible. It's only visible because you've got an obscenely high accuracy camera. That doesn't make the story any better.
Yeah, no,
It just means now we have to fix it.
Yeah.
In the 60s, you wouldn't have had to fix it because the TV couldn't show that fidelity of image.
foam latex.
That's why film is.
Yeah,
I still love film, and when I shoot things digitally, which I don't get the opportunity to DP my projects anymore, is I always try to get a filmic look with it. You know, film's nice because by its very nature, the image is a little bit soft because the film is having to go through sprockets, and there's a little bit of play between the sprocket and the sprocket hole that slightly defocuses that image, where the wig lace is invisible. That pube is. But you don't
look at that and go, "Oh, that's blurry. That needs fixing."
No, it doesn't.
No,
It doesn't look blurry
because when you watch Star Wars, you didn't go, "That's crap picture quality."
No,
it's just very happy with
gorgeous
it.
quality.
It's only Sony that are going to make money by having better. You know, you're going to need bigger hard drives and faster processors. They're the only people that really benefit from it.
No, I watched.
I don't think EastEnders is better because it's in 4K.
The first big screen TV I got. I remember watching Peter Jackson's The Hobbit on the first big screen digital TV we got.
With 60
that he
frames.
shot 60 frames. I thought it looked like videotape. To me.
Yeah, I mean, quite often.
It didn't look better. It looked like somebody had shot it with their home video camera because it was so crisp. I had to tweak the TV to change the cycle rate so that it looked like film.
Yeah.
I mean, do you really want to see the pores of someone's face? I just want the story. It's like the new Evil Dead film. It was too clean. It felt modern. For example, modern horror. Brad knows. For me, it's too clean. It just feels artificial.
The only real thing I see is latitude with it because it's in such high definition quality. You could shoot the entire movie in a wide shot and then just push in for your close-ups without having to redo your camera setups without changing noticeably the image quality. But then that's just lazy filmmaking.
Yeah, and that's not a good thing to breed, is it?
No.
That's why you have kit inspections in the army, because you want to maintain a high standard at all times so that things are just better. If you start looking to cut corners, then pretty soon you don't want your surgeon to be operating you to be the guy that was cutting corners. Do you know what I mean? So nobody benefits from people being a little bit slacker. That just goes downhill.
Sure.
You're better maintaining high standards all the time, unnecessarily so that when you are called upon, you're ready to go. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
And I think that's no bad thing. But yeah, with the digital stuff and the cameras and things, I think honestly, no matter what you're doing, I think you still need to pursue something. What I find is easier if you're working is you don't have to worry about the brief. Somebody's giving you the brief. We already have the crew, the story. We just need you to do a nose for this shot on this day, looking like this on that actor. That's it. So everything else goes out the window. You can focus everything you have on that one task, and it's very good. Whereas if you can do anything you like, you might go to and then suddenly you meet the difficulty, and you're convinced that difficulty is because you chose the wrong thing. It's like, no, this is just the shit you've got to suck up on this job. But there's always the chance to skirt around it, and I think there's something quite nice about being restricted by a brief. And I think with creative stuff, when you're focusing on something, you'll pull in what you need to pull in to get the job done. And I think that's creative stuff. Whereas if it's too unattached, if it's not anchored to anything, you'll spend a lot of energy. The analogy I've used before is like getting in a cab and saying drive, and the guy's where? I don't know, just keep driving. And then he runs out of fuel, he's got to refuel, and suddenly it's costing you a fortune, and you're still no closer to where you're supposed to be because you don't know where you're supposed to be. Yeah. So the first thing is you've got to know where you're going first. Then when you have a destination, then you call the cab, and then you try and get there efficiently, and that's basically what you do with anything. So I think it's really important to be creative and actually have a reason. So you're trying to make something for a reason. It matters to you. There's something in it for you. And you'll pull in and you'll suck up learning ZBrush because it gets you to this point. But if you're just doing it because, well, I heard I'm supposed to, well, that doesn't fucking wash, and you'll get bored and go away. So it's really important to have something that you want to do, like a pursuit, it's something that's pulling you along. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I think that's actually a really good strategy if you want to learn something. Like for me personally, like if I wanted to, whatever I wanted to learn, whether it was a technique or something digital or whatever else, I need to set myself a project and have a very clear aim for that project. So that then gives me a reason to want to well, I now need this technique to create this shape, you know. So it's a really good way to sort of push you forward. Whereas if you're just trying to read the manual, you know, for what you might encounter, it doesn't work.
It's ridiculous.
Deadlines are important.
Yeah.
You gotta set deadlines.
But with ZBrush, that's how I learned. It was a case of I want to make a Frankenstein head.
Yeah.
So I'll sculpt it until I hit something I can't do. And then I'll find out what that is and then bit by bit. And ultimately I get to sculpt the thing. Whereas if I'm just here to taste everything, it's not really, it's not the same thing at all. So
absolutely.
Yeah, give yourself a project. But you will have briefs presumably you set. But I think it's very important to set yourself a brief and kind of ignore anything except what the end result is, and then you'll figure it out. Trust me, figure it out. Because when I get a job, if they say we want to know, so I'm like, what would I do with neck? It's like, no, we need to fucking know. I don't care what you want. That's what we need. That's what we're going to pay you for. So you figure it out. And
I think the really challenging thing on this course is, and these guys will really feel it in the next study block, because we have a brief. They always have a project brief, and you know, usually we have parameters around what can be made and a theme that goes with it. We're sort of fairly specific for the first study block, but as the study blocks go on, the brief becomes looser, and I think that becomes harder for a lot of students, because it's like, well, now I can kind of make anything. What do I make, and how do I match that with my skill set?
It's that fear of missing out, because you're convinced that if I chose this, that would be a better thing. It's like, you think about something like The Nutty Professor. It's a fat dude. That's all the makeup is. It's a fat makeup. But it's fucking great.
It's incredible.
It's really well done. Yeah. And it matters more how something is done than what it is. It's not like, oh, it would have been better if he had, 15 eyes in his neck. So it wouldn't make it a better makeup.
That is such a great, incredible makeup. Probably one of my favourite makeups ever, I think. And obviously no accident, it was Rick Baker makeup. But there's a moment in that movie where he's getting heckled by a comedian, and he's trying to sort of squeeze out, and he can't quite get out. And he turns around to the camera, and it's a really emotional moment. And the whole screen is filled just with that prosthetic makeup, and it totally sells that moment.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of the real test of a makeup, if you're not taken out of the movie and you are invested in the moment emotionally, and the actor's performance. And that movie just did that beautifully.
And that's why the brief is good, because when you're doing your project, to you, the makeup is the thing.
Yeah.
And you get distracted by that, and actually it's better if it sinks into something bigger.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard to do that successfully, I think. Plus, when you're in the process of learning the tools of things as well, you're going to be distracted by the mechanics of it. But when you get really good, you lose track of time. Yeah. And you get into that flow state, and you just...
But if you're doing a fat makeup for, for Rick Baker, for whether it's Click or Norbit or Nutty Professor, when you're learning how to do this stuff, it's a whole different animal, because when you have the freedom to design your own project with, you're writing the brief, you're not being given something that this is what you're going to do, and then you know what you have to do, but you're given the freedom to come up with something on your own.
Yeah.
The temptation frequently is to bite off more than you can chew, to go for something bigger than you know how to do. And, and it's tough as a teacher, because I don't want to tell my student who's come up with this grandiose idea for a project that you're going to fail at this. You will not complete this. The scale of it is too big. You got and you don't want to quash their enthusiasm, but you don't want to set them up for failure, because they're just going to give up.
But also, there are some things that are just a bit like you said about Lord of the Rings, and you'll see a lot of people doing an orc makeup, in a week later. So it's fine, but we've already seen orcs done by the very best people with all the budget in the world. Like if you do a crap Hellboy makeup, what is the point?
Or
maybe if you want to learn the process, it's a worthy exercise, but it's not going to be better. We've seen Hellboy in Hellboy, and that was done very competently. So in a way, it's kind of like, it's all right, but don't badly play a really good song we've heard the original of. I'd rather hear a crap song that you made up.
Do
you know what I mean?
That's a good analogy. I like
It's
that.
really good to do that, because that's how you get that. By all means, practice, but don't pass it off. Like if I write out all of Shakespeare in my own handwriting, that doesn't make me a good writer. It makes me a crap photocopier. right? So it's coming up with stuff yourself because that's the muscle you need to exercise to get better. And you will be crap when you start, but it'll be the best that you've done. And then you'll keep doing it and it'll get a little bit better each time, like exercising your muscle. And that's the feeling you should enjoy. By all means, copy along a song and practice, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's something about projects like I see in orc makeup, or Christ, yet another Navi fucking. Like, it's just. I'm not slagging it off. I'm just saying we've already seen it. We know that the Voldemort doesn't have a nose. It was digitally removed.
I think Vecna was my favourite one. Remember there was a Vecna.
Christ, cordyceps like the ears, and it's
But
fine.
copying
It's just,
somebody else's makeup.
but I'll be able to look at that in 10 years ago and know exactly what year that makeup was done because that's what was in vogue. Like when you see the barbed wire tattoos, it's like, oh, that's 1995, well done. But it's just one of those things that's it's specific to that thing. And if you have someone in orc makeup stood out front of Tesco Express, it looks stupid. It needs Middle Earth around it. So it just looks like Lucy from Accounts. It doesn't look like Paul Clark, the indestructible. It doesn't work. Whereas if he had a really realistic nose and I had no idea they were wearing rubber, that's more effective. And it didn't cost us much. Because I'm saying we've seen really good orcs.
I really want to do an orc makeup now and put them in front of Tesco.
But my point to not counter you, but it's copying somebody else's work is a great way to let you see just what you don't know by trying to reproduce a fabulous orc or legend or the demon from Legend or Hellboy, whatever. Gives you can go, oh, how the hell I can't master that neck wrinkle. How did they do that?
Yes. No, as an exercise.
As an exercise, it's definitely worth.
But if that is the limit
pursuing.
of your thing, if you just do beautifully copy things, you're not going to get hired as an original designer.
Yeah.
And Instagram kind of makes that happen a lot. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just if you were at Disney, you wouldn't want to see someone with thousands of characters you've already drawn. Like, I'm hiring people that come with stuff we haven't done. I don't want to see Mickey Mouse. We can do Mickey Mouse with Disney. Do you know what I mean?
It's funny.
Duncan's got a comment.
It's interesting. I'm a fine art lecturer. That's my day job. And when we're teaching fine art practice, you might start with a transcription, a copy.
Yes.
That might be a way in,
yes.
one element. But what we're doing this week over there is we're talking about, look at the methodologies and the techniques, and then make your own thing in response to that. So
yes.
look at Rachel White recasting inside of a house. You can't do that. She did that. That's done. But cast the inside of a cigarette box or your pocket. Have a play with the methodology and the technique in a new space.
Yeah.
So you can still be inspired, but you're not trying to emulate. Because transcription can be a useful exercise, but it very quickly gets flat.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what you were saying also earlier about limiting a palette, we call that. So working with a set of 3 paints or working with particular wire and willow and nothing else. Once you restrain the parameter of the project, it's really freeing. When you've got everything to play with, it's instantly a problem.
Yeah, it's the irony, isn't it?
Yeah. That's the reaction to the interface of ZBrush when you first open it and go, what the fuck have I done?
But it's the same with a set of gouache paints or big bag posters, just restraining that and giving yourself, as I say, a limited palette in painting terms is a very good device. It's a well-proven device in all creative settings. So it's really interesting to hear some of the overlaps with your field in relation to the other fields that I work with.
Definitely.
It's funny because I was just going to say, with the briefs that we've been given, I've done the exact thing. I went in wanting to do a classic Dr. Zaius, and to learn the basics that I don't know. I wanted to use that as the foundation for the rest of my modules. And then Neill came around, like yourself, and he was like, "Oh, it's been done. It's what is it?" And then I go to trying to do a hybrid, realizing that I can't do a hybrid. I haven't had 30 years in the industry to know anatomy. I've never done anatomy in my life. To then, okay, I'll do a chimp, and I'll break it down. And it's exactly as you say. Both aspects are really interesting to look at.
Yeah, it's really true. That's sort of a common problem with copying, say, a fantasy character, because the design of those characters originally, you used Legend as an example, those Botine makeups are incredible. But that's somebody that already has a very clear understanding of the limits of, human anatomy, and is able to incorporate that and stretch it and exaggerate it and caricature it and create great shape language, because there's all of that design background and talent and history. But it's very hard for students to copy a fantasy character and then use, like, they're not really getting under the hood, if that makes sense. You know, they're if you try to do something realistic and copy something from a photo or something that's real, then you're kind of going back to the foundations and learning all of that stuff. So when you finally do a fantasy character at some point, it has credibility and believability because you're bringing in all those hallmarks and touchstones of things that are actually real.
Yeah, animation is a skill that you have. If character makeup design is what you want to do, whether you want to do old people, ethnic people, fantasy creatures, aliens, whatever it is, anatomy is absolutely essential. Doesn't matter if you're doing a non-human character, anatomy is anatomy. The way muscles insert on bones, they're going to be the same way, whether it's a dog, a cat, an orc, a demon, or an old man. It's going to move the same way. Maybe the forearm's elongated, but everything underneath the skin is going to be assembled the same way.
I say one of the joys of being in university, as I did with my students, is that this isn't the village of your world. There's a whole world of other things going on out on this campus. We talk a lot about that. So we've got an anatomy lecturer teaching 20 yards from here.
Go, sit in.
With a huge collection of human skeletons and skulls today from Oxford, from their collection at Ruskin. So make links, have conversations. You're meeting me today, I can tell you over there, we have a chat. And actually there's a lot of skills beyond the landscape of this department.
Absolutely, yeah.
And while you're here with each other, the peer-to-peer, the Exeter's got a really good collection of animal skeletons up at the Exeter campus on Penryn. You can get in there, you can sit there and draw armadillos and 12 types of ape and monkey. Real ones there. And they don't mind, they love seeing you in their drawing. So
it's incredible.
But look at those taxidermy animals. Look at the nature stuff on National Geographic Channel, or just Google pictures of rhinoceros, hippopotamus. Look at the skin, elephants. Look at the skin at their joints, how the skin wrinkles. I mean, looking at my hand, how my hand collapses. Look at what's going on in here between my thumb and index finger when I close my hand, how the skin folds in over itself.
You have very youthful hands, by the way.
Years of moisturising.
Yeah, mine don't look that good.
But it's that kind of stuff it's these sorts of observations that you need to put into your sculptures. I mean, your rhinoceros looks fabulous.
Thank you.
That's it's all about observing. When I was teaching, I taught a visual effects miniatures class that we did everything in HO scale because HO is the most widely modeled scale in the world. So there's all kinds of super detailed stuff that you can buy for HO scenic models. I like the scenery and the buildings as probably more than I actually like the trains themselves. But we would build these 4x8 foot models modularly so we could put them together in different orientations. And then we would photograph them in real sunlight. We'd take them outside and we'd line them up with streets and real trees in the sky and photograph it. And we'd change our depth of field. So we'd have very narrow depth of field so the foreground and the background would be out of focus and we'd be sharply here. And super detailed stuff so that I'd send them out as a project before we'd actually start building to take 100 photographs of building walls, where you could see what rain and snow and stuff does, how it distresses the brick, and look at the curves and look at the different color pavement where pavement's been patched because of a pothole, where the newer asphalt is darker than the old asphalt, and where city works people have spray painted where they're going to be digging up to put in a new water line or change these things, and how grass is growing up through the curbs and how water pools in the gutter along, that kind of stuff. Because I see people model stuff in 3D, gorgeous models, but they texture it and they color it, and it all looks fake because it's too pristine. It doesn't have doesn't have life on it. Yeah. So when we build our monitor, we would we'd print out little graffiti decals that we put on the sides of walls, and we do this really stuff that's hyper realistic. And with the depth of field, we'd go outside and shoot it, and if you do it right, you cannot tell that this H, which is 1/84th scale, unless you flood it with water or set it on fire or blow it up, you can't tell it's not real. Fire and water don't scale well, so your miniatures need to be at least 1/8 scale in order for those effects to look authentic.
Thunderbird's would be a good example. Oh, yeah.
But
the kind of joyous failure of that.
Yeah, but HO scale, if you build it well, you can do beautiful things with it, and then you can shoot people on green screen, and we composited all of these students into the scenes doing things, and it was fantastic, and they had a ball doing it.
It's still somewhat done more in Japan on sort of their children's TVs like Ultraman and obviously Godzilla films. They've got these stunning shots where you just see the most detailed office, and you're just like, for a second, like, that looks like a real office, and you're like, that's a miniature.
Yeah.
And there's this weird joy that you feel when you realize that.
I follow a few miniatures Instagram pages, and I look at some of the stuff that these guys are building, and some of them are even like N gauge or smaller than HO. And I go,
I mean, Nolan shoots with models, doesn't he? Some of the tumble shots and the time. I mean, he likes that old school, and Abrams uses these models as well. I mean, there's still a desire, isn't it, for many filmmakers to use the practical model.
Yeah. Well, Joel Harlow actually went to school to be an animator. That was his first vocation. Yeah. And during the COVID lockdown, and now with the SAG strike, Joel has been doing a lot of animation stuff. He's been doing some of his own short films with live action.
So some of those graveyard models and stuff,
but also doing some stop motion animation stuff with miniatures that they've been building. He and Rod Maxwell and I think Marty Matulis is one of his. He's been having a great time.
But we
getting into this stuff.
Everyone here will know that that obviously the Empire Strikes Back, Tippett's work, particularly, Thomas and the Walkers. I mean, they're kind of canon, aren't they? They're kind of like deities in the world of that kind of model making animated filming.
Well, we were talking about some of Leica's films, Box Trolls, Paranorman.
Yes.
They 3D print everything. They're building their big miniatures sets that they're all designing in CAD and 3D, and then they're printing.
Yeah, of course. Why not? That just makes sense.
But they're using a Stratasys J750 printer, which is it's like $1.5 million 3D printer, but it'll print up to 9 different materials simultaneously. So they print all of the phonemes for the faces and everything fully painted, so there's no continuity problems whatsoever. But I watched Paranorman a number of times. I had my students watch. I said, watch this. We just turn the volume off. You can read their lips.
Yeah, and
that's how good the animation is. But also they print out. I think there are 29 phonemes in human English. And human English, American English.
American English.
Yeah, American English.
You're in England, mate.
You've got like 50. But you can actually read the characters' lips.
That's no good if what they're saying is rubbish and the plotting's rubbish and the pacing's rubbish. There's a lot of things come together. And Paranorman's a good example of where that's that lovely scene with the bully and great breakdancing, which is in my top 2 or 3 animated sequences. Yeah, it's so good because it's also deliberately a bit quirky, and there's still a recognition that it can't be too perfect. It's still got a little bit animated and stiff. Because if you lose all of that, I mean, Aardman friends who work there,
the ghost do that also really.
Yeah, that whole Aardman to kind of move to digital, and then they're kind of stepping back and what are we trying to achieve? We don't want this. The charm of Wallace & Gromit is that there's a kind of failure in the kind of technique. It's a kind of not perfect, that imperfection, that hand touch. Yep. So it's finding that fine line between the practical, physical, real, slightly failing on the technical level, and then the success of it as a film.
That's an example of someone who's very competent with their medium, who are not distracted by the medium itself.
Yes.
They've got a story they want to tell, and they'll use their stuff expertly. And I think that happens certainly with a lot of early digital stuff. Like we saw, you see some amazing stuff in Forrest Gump, Mummy too, but they look like a bad place. The Scorpion King. Do you know what I mean? They looked awful because they were so preoccupied with getting this thing done. No one really gave a shit.
Or the Zombies in Iron Legend. So much I love about that film, and then there's I don't like that.
Well, Stuart and I are first thing Saturday morning, Stuart and I are sitting down with V. Neill and having a conversation with her. And one of the things that'll probably come up is the makeup in Ed Wood. Because not only was the movie shot in black and white, but some of the makeup had to be awful. So how do you do an awful makeup well?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I love that movie. I just think that's
it's brilliant.
His best film.
Brilliant. That was her second Oscar.
Yeah, incredible.
Second Oscar.
It was funny you're talking about, obviously, earlier with the ZBrush and actors, and obviously going with miniatures and the ability of Leica being able to 3D print everything perfectly. Obviously, actors do not really like talking to a floating green ball, but you literally could use ZBrush, and if you wanted to print off a 3D skeleton of a velociraptor, have someone in it, and do it green, you've got an actor being able to do
absolutely.
Yeah. But you had that with the Jurassic Park. You had all the Neil Scanlon stuff. They were making like puppets, partial puppets.
Yeah.
So you can react to it, and then you just fill in the gaps and take away the rods.
Yeah.
So you get the performance, you get the reaction with a performer in real time. So you get a different take every time.
Yeah.
But Tippett had already shot, hadn't he, quite a lot of the elements of that. There are elements of that. You can see the film as we know it now against the kind of animated test kind of shots in the early, at that kind of division of the decision to move to digital and that kind of combat between the forms that was in that first film. Yeah. And that kitchen scene, I've seen a stop motion version of that kitchen scene, certainly of the Velociraptors, which is really interesting. To compare the two.
Because again, that's that whole holistic view of how this is going to work by someone who's very masterful in the filmmaking process, but someone that's all excited about it because it's new to them, they're going to screw it up. You need someone. So that's why I encourage everyone to be very competent at something, because you need to be so good at it you don't notice it anymore.
One of my favorite shots in Jurassic Park is with one of the practical puppets, when it's looking through the kitchen porthole and breathes out and breath on the window.
That just makes it feel real, doesn't it?
That's freaking amazing.
But I think the eye collapse, when it looks at the window to a T-Rex, that's a puppet head, isn't it?
Yeah.
So some of the kind of key kind of scenes.
Yeah, so the animatronics in there have gotten such... Animatronics are amazing too, and
I think
that level where you get the iris shifting.
There's definitely been a bit of a renaissance in practical effects. There was definitely that time where I think a lot of particularly animatronic work was becoming less and less. It was being taken over by lots of cheap digital. And then I think all of these things we've been talking about, art direction, design, storytelling, when all that kind of fails, then you realise, well, hang on, it's just a technique. And when you have all those things in place and you have people that are really masterful at their particular skill set involved, it doesn't really matter whether it's a practical effect or a digital effect or whatever it is, so long as it helps tell the story and it's shot in a way that's convincing and believable.
It's all
for an
about the
audience.
storytelling. And visual effects should only be used when necessary. It shouldn't be used just because you can doesn't mean you should. Visual effects are more expensive today still than animatronics.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
When at the height of our visual effects shop in LA, in Denver, after we moved out of LA, our average finished per second cost of animation was between $650 and $1,800 per second in 1994.
Yeah. Because it's got to pass through a lot of hands. Like a VFX shot has to pass through a lot of hands.
You think like if you could have modelled up a barrel or something, you think all these assets, and now that these assets exist, we must have built one of everything that could exist. In theory, that's just sat in a hard drive not doing anything, right? But they still bill you because they know you're going to build one otherwise.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like, so it doesn't get cheaper, even though logically, but a hard drive is the same as a warehouse full of physical objects that could degrade.
Right.
So it's like, I get annoyed every time my digital stuff is like, like Dropbox subscription comes up in December, and it'll be more than it was last year. But why? It's the physical space. But because presumably there are physical fans, it's basically a hard drive on someone else's computer, right? That's basically what all air fucking storage is, and it's like, okay, so there's still a physical grounded reality to everything, really.
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone likes electric cars, but That's got to come from somewhere. And we laughed at the diesel generators.
The diesel generators that are powering those electric charging stations.
You're not charging up 1,000
Hilarious,
Teslas with the
isn't it?
sunlight.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So there's always a physical buck that stops somewhere.
That's right.
So a lot of people want to pretend that there isn't. And with the digital stuff as well, if you do an amazing digital T-Rex, somebody's been really paying attention to what a T-Rex looks like and sculpting it. Do you know what I mean? So it comes from
that's right.
somewhere. Because as soon as you digitally generate, if you could just hit a button and it makes everything, who's going to watch that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'll give you an example. The first car was probably amazing, right?
Yeah.
You're in a car, it's driving on. The first aircraft, amazing. You know, did you when you landed, was there a standing ovation because you were flying like a Greek? No, because that's what people do now.
Oh, he survived.
If he was able to fly faster than any aircraft, that would be something to cheer. But it becomes baseline. Do you see what I mean? And it's the same. It's like you're just doing something digitally doesn't mean, oh, it's amazing. We just go, well, you know. You're standing on the shoulders of giants. Do something with that. That's a tool. Do something with it.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know what I mean? Well, no one's impressed with this, but the first digital recorder, pretty cool. But now it's like, digital recorder, so what? But what are you going to do with it? Are you going to make a compelling, interesting story?
I'm still pretty impressed with
right.
this.
It's going to be interesting. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's still, it's what you do with it. We're only interested in what you do with it. We're not interested in the thing itself.
Well,
and just you having it doesn't make it you or it interesting.
Absolutely. You know, it's like using materials as well. You know, it's like I think the inclination for a lot of students is to want to suddenly have all the very best materials to make things. But you know, I've seen people make stuff out of cardboard. There's a guy that makes cardboard animals, and they look incredible. It's like it's whether you can take something and master it and bend it to your will. Like that's real, you know, craftsmanship. And
give somebody a challenge. I taught a fundamentals of design class where as the final project everybody had to build a chair out of corrugated cardboard that would support their weight.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah,
we got some great
that's a super fun project. Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to rationalize, figure out how to do that, because triangle is the strongest shape in nature.
Yeah.
And that's why corrugated cardboard is so strong, because it's two layers of paper sandwiched between a bunch of triangular tubes.
Yeah, it's an engineering challenge as well.
It is, but then see the beauty of that is it has a specific brief.
Yes,
yes.
I know what I've got to do. It's got to support my weight.
Doesn't matter. You know, can be a lounge chair. Can be
exactly.
Can be
So
a
you
bar
focus
stool,
on that one.
Focus on that one
You
thing.
start from the structural requirement and work out what's from there.
And the result is going to be the basis. It's going to be based on multiple failures.
Yeah,
because nobody's going to nail it first time out of the gate.
Another fun way to do that is to give students a Sainsbury's kind of carry bag, a piece of string, and 2 sheets of paper and an egg. They've got to throw it out of a 4-story window without breaking the egg. And everyone finds solutions. And somebody will succeed, and lots will fail. And it's lots of fun watching.
Wow,
that sounds like fun.
And some people think, you can do that. I'm just going to paint a beautiful pilot on the egg. Tries to death, all the more exciting.
Can I blow the contents of the egg out?
No, you can't play the egg. You have to have weight.
See, I like the lateral thinking right there. Yeah.
You didn't say I couldn't, but you did.
That's why you have to walk the floor. Hold on, I can see what you do. Yeah.
And you have to be underneath it while we drop it.
It doesn't collect you to crash. It's got the egg in there.
That's magic, man.
But it's interesting.
Did anyone have any questions while we have these guys here? Yeah.
You said that one of your favorite prosthetic makeups was the Nutty Professor in that little scene, which I just is a great response, because you don't think the Nutty Professor when you think prosthetic makeup. But I was going to ask, what's your guys' favorite prosthetic makeup that you've seen on screen that didn't pull you out of it because it was prosthetic, but almost brought you in more because it made it
my favorite, hands down, is Dustin Hoffman as Jack Crabbe in Little Big Man. That's my number one. Though there are some good ones. I'm pretty jazzed about Mike Marino's Eddie Murphy makeup on the cover of the 4th edition of my book. So I don't know if you noticed that's Eddie Murphy in that makeup from Coming to America 2. But they cut those scenes from the movie, so the best makeup in the film is not in the film.
Based on the cover of the book.
Based on the cover of the book. Based on the cover of the book.
I think my all-time favourite makeup is actually another Rick Baker makeup, strangely. Coming to America that he did, the old Jewish guy.
Saul.
Like it's just such an amazing makeup, you know, and it's everything makeup is about. It's about disguise. It's about creating character. It's about the storytelling element to it. It's just, I think it encapsulates the spirit of, and it's beautifully executed, of doing a really fantastic makeup job.
And then what Mike Marino did with it.
Yes.
Took years later, redid that makeup, but with the appropriate aging of the character.
Yeah, no, their work was incredible as well.
Yeah.
You know, that very first makeup was, I think it still stands out for me as my kind of, the makeup I saw that I didn't even realise was makeup at first. You know?
Yeah. I think age makeup is probably the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it's so dependent on anatomy. And because it's real. You know, you can do monsters and aliens, and because it's not real, you're more forgiving, even though you still need to have anatomical accuracy with, you know, how things move, because, you know, skin wrinkles based on the pull of the muscle that's perpendicular to the pull of the muscle underneath the skin. So we have to know what's going on under the skin to do, but it's, if an age makeup isn't done right, you can tell. If it wasn't sculpted well,
like the Father Mary makeup in Exorcist.
That's another one.
You don't even know it's makeup.
You don't, and they don't.
When I think that's why
who's
Dick
Max von
Smith.
Sydow? No one's ever heard of him. Really.
Dick wasn't nominated for an Academy Award because nobody knew that Max von Sydow was in makeup.
Yeah.
And if you look at pictures of Max von Sydow when he was Father Merrin's age in the movie, because he was only 40 years old when they made The Exorcist. That's what Max von Sydow looked like when he was actually that age. Literally, you put the makeup and his aged face side by side and go, holy shit.
It's really,
it's the same. Dick was a genius.
Last year, I think Neill did a makeup on Pierce Brosnan for the
Last
Rifleman.
That was really good.
He showed me the first sort of test makeups, and in bright sunlight, and it was just flawless. It's something I have to say that I'm going to say because Neil's not here. He's insanely modest about what he's capable of doing. He's done a lot of character makeups, a lot of beautiful age makeups, and you know the other one was the Boris Johnson makeup he did on Ken Branagh.
Yeah,
it's just
I love the makeup he did. It's on the cover of the first edition of my book.
Yeah, that's right.
Middle-aged Frankenstein's monster.
Absolutely. You know, it's just like he really is just he's always bringing these things in and showing us, and it's like really quite incredible stuff. And he also has just a terrific understanding of how a face ages. Yeah, it's like what you guys were saying. It's really understanding the underlying anatomy and how it kind of breaks down over time. You know,
no, he's also a fabulous teacher.
He is. Yeah.
He's a good example of someone that really gets what it is that he's supposed to be doing, and he's not. No part of his brain is occupied in how am I going to do it. He's thinking about what the finished thing is.
Absolutely.
He's not thinking about what shapes do I do.
Yeah.
He thinks about the end result and work backwards from there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you need, I think.
That's
right. To not be like, you're not trying to learn music if you're on a masterpiece.
Yeah.
You should know all that. You know where the keys are. You don't need to look at the keyboard.
That's right.
It's in your head. What's the tune? You're playing with it, and it's a language that you speak very well. And that's why you need to get through the clunky bullshit of how, where, keys, what. Once you know that, then you stop thinking about it. It's like learning to drive. If you can drive, Jesus Christ, I weigh a ton. I could kill someone. I've got mirrors. I've got, you know what I mean? And eventually,
reverse parking.
You forget all about that, and you just drive because you know how to do it. And you think only about where I've got to be and get there safely. You're not thinking about how do I operate.
I'm terrified of trying to drive in this country. I could do it, but I gotta really be paying attention all the time.
Yeah, so you don't intuitively go the other way on the wrong side.
Tried to cross the street today to get a cup of coffee and almost got hit by a car. I was looking the wrong direction.
The other great thing about the book is we get to see Neill with long hair.
Yeah.
We get to see Neill with long hair. It's like surfer Neill to modern Neill.
Absolutely. Did anyone else have any things that they wanted to bring up or topics?
Here we got
to
one.
discuss?
I was wondering about digital and practical, kind of like having that hybrid. I don't know if it is a recent thing or just something I've looked at, like with Avatar and again with the Last of Us series, where they created a really good makeup as like almost like a lighting reference to then give off to the CG guys. I was kind of wondering how that works and like how much detail do you need to put in something like that?
A lot of that is compositing work done in post-production, but they will usually have, if they're going to do a combination of practical and digital for certain scenes, if they're going to have digital characters in a scene with real people in makeup, they'll have somebody from the visual effects department there taking measurements of camera height, camera tilt, pan, rotation. They'll take light readings there. They will probably, they may have some different ways of doing things now with HDMI lighting.
With the ball.
With the ball, where they'll do something, with a really, really shiny ball. What I used to do is we had a big glass globe that was mirrored on one half and white on the other, and we would take light readings and photographs of both sides that we would then use to match up that lighting information with the characters in the animated scene that's going to get composited together with the live action.
I think that the lighting is the absolute key to
absolutely.
the effects.
Yeah.
Because like if you don't match the lighting to the environment, it doesn't matter how well modelled and textured something is, it just stands out.
That's why it's nice to have your physical model there and guesswork out of it.
Absolutely. So, those physical models that go on set, a lot of the time the lighting information is what's really valuable out of that. Because you can have something that is not modelled quite as nicely, but if it's lit so it convincingly matches the environment, and you kind of buy it.
That's why you look at some of the movies, you look at Star Wars, it came out in 1977, where they shot practical miniatures of the spaceships that they then composited with other backgrounds, and other movies that we thought were really, really great. But you look at them today, and they haven't redone, and you can see the little halo around the digital or the practical stuff that's been composited together, and so, God, how did I not see that when I watched it in the theater? But now it's glaring at me on TV, and I saw it in a theater.
You were saying about the lighting models as well. I remember on the first Mummy, the good one, not the Tom Cruise one, that ILM, when they still had a model department, had built a partial mummy for lighting reference. So it wasn't the finished imitator, but it was like a mock-up, and it wasn't great, I don't think. That's me being snooty, but it wasn't done by the creature department, it was done by ILM, who were, John Burton, I think, was running the visual effects department for that. And when they did other bits and bobs, we would make dummies, like the scene, I don't know if you remember, there's a scene where there's a kind of a 360 camera and all those mummies pouring their way to the thing. They were guys in suits, and then they composited a lot of the stuff over the top of that. What's interesting now is you get someone on like Star Wars, you'll sculpture that digitally. So you could 3D print something to scale, because you can make toys for the producers, they like little things, and then you can scale the big thing up for a lighting, and you'll paint it beautifully, and then you give that to visual effects, and guess what? It's exactly the same. So, it becomes like a currency you can deal in, and that's why I think it's good to
There were some great shots in that movie, the combination when, I can't think of the actor's name, but he's actually in the book, when he's regenerating for the first time, and you can see into his face when he bites down on the skin. That looked great, and the miniature of the pyramids at the beginning, how that was all composited together, was a great opening shot.
Yeah, but it did feel like when you first see him attack, and he's standing still, and every single muscle's moving because they can. You're like Steamboat Willie. That's him standing still. It's like, dude, it looked like a big, like, oh, fuck you, practice. That's what it felt like. And it's like, and when you look at it now, it kind of looks over the top, like the light that seems to emanate from the darkness of a mouth, like it never gets up. You see the centre of Harry Potter. It's like, it's not black inside the mouth.
alive.
So why couldn't you just not light it? It's weird. But it's odd things like that. But that's because it's a similar thing with a lot of 3D printing stuff as well. It's like 3D printing materials, they're optimized for the act of printing, not for the finished thing. Because it's very hard to make things print consistently. If you've got, hundreds of meters of plastic, it has to be consistent because the next roll has to be exactly the same. So there's a kind of a baseline you work to, which isn't the best in the world. It's just what you get. It's a £300 printer. What do you want? So it's going to be like that. So it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to replace ceramics or Kevlar or whatever other things can be made in other ways. And it's like that with digital, I think. There's a kind of a baseline that it goes with. So you've got to be clever with it. And you will see lighting stand-ins are beautifully overdone because you're the department and you want people to see a crappy paint job.
Yeah, that's right.
If nothing else, it's like, is that the best they can do? It kind of frightens people into doing things digitally because if they see a crappy practical, they may think it's because it's practical rather than because it's just a bad paint job.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it's like, so everyone tends to be on their best behaviour when they're going out there.
Yeah.
Although
Well, all kinds of
thinking
things, sneak through and wind up on screen in the finished product. But for various reasons, it's I can see the entire crew in the reflection on the side of this bus. Well, that might have been the very best take that they got.
Yeah.
And everything else, or they literally ran out of money, so they couldn't reshoot it. Those things happen.
You sit with those things.
You had something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've forgotten.
It happens to me all the time.
Oh, I was going to say, if say you make something like your sculpture and paint it all like in daylight, does it ever happen that it looks great in daylight and then on the set the lighting?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
How would you fix that? Just change lighting, or?
I think it depends if it's opaque or if it's translucent.
Yeah.
Because the translucent things tend to, like, if the light changes, then it will change it too.
Yeah.
But if something's opaque, it can reflect more light than it normally would. And that tends to be more back in the day, I think, because you had to amplify a lot more light and things for it to show. But cameras and sensitivity and the lighting and the way digital stuff works now, you need less light, I think, than you used to. And foam used to reflect a lot more light. You'd have to paint it darker so that it didn't look too pale. That was always the thing.
I do a fair amount of theater also. I mean, I've done Shrek on stage maybe 15 times. I've done Bat Boy the musical a couple times. First time did Bat Boy. Are you familiar with Bat Boy?
I don't really know.
It's a great show. Anyway, we had these Bat Boy ears, big old bat ears on this actor, and in the lighting in the makeup room, you couldn't tell they weren't his ears, except that they were, big pointy bat ears. We got him out on stage under the cues that they were going to do for the show. And I go, holy shit, they were all blown out. They look horrible. So we went back in and I painted them like 2 shades darker than his skin tone. They looked, in the makeup lighting, they looked terrible.
Yeah.
But we got him out on stage under show lights, and you couldn't tell they weren't his ears.
Wow, amazing.
Similar story, Tammy Lane doing makeup on The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Andrew Lesney was the DP on that. I won't go into some of the horrible stories that Tammy has told me about working on that show. Fortunately, Andrew Lesney's dead now, and I can tell those stories if I wanted, but she had a terrible experience on The Hobbit, even though she had an Academy Award already. But because of the cameras that they were using, they had to redo all of the makeups to the red side, so that off camera the makeups looked like these guys were all horribly sunburned. But on camera, they look great. So you look at the dwarves off. I've got pictures of them off camera, and it's Tammy, what'd you do? But you watch the movie.
But that's the same with a lot of makeup generally, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you meet them in it looks overdone, but actually in the context of the stage, when you shoot.
So you gotta. It has to work within the context of how it's going to be viewed.
Yeah.
If that is to happen, then does the directors and stuff not get annoyed that you've got to now go back because you've held up production?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But if it's a legitimate, if what you've done is a legitimate, not error, but it's just like a miscalculation. And normally, like you say, you figure it out. It's because the lighting has changed.
Because you don't always have time to do testing of the makeups in the optimal conditions.
You don't. But
before
what you do
shoot.
is you ask for a test and you say why you're asking for a test
Yeah.
and what the consequences of maybe not having test could be.
Yeah.
So when it comes to pass, you brought this up.
Yeah.
That's, you know.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you need to understand these things going in, so that if you make these requests up front and they say no, when you get on set and they go, "This looks like crap," what you have to read it. I told you so.
Yes, but what's interesting is when you say it looks like crap, and this is something I've thought about a lot with colour theory, is that you have to be specific. In what way is it crap? And it's your job to analyse it. It's what? Too or not enough? What? It's too pale and not red enough, so it needs to be darker and redder. We've zeroed in on what the problem is. Make it darker and redder. And that's why I think the struggle of doing realistic skin tones is really good to do, because it really teaches you to do that. I'm the same with...
So in addition to anatomy, color theory.
Colour theory. But that's why I like mixing up skin tones. So my habit is, if I'm mixing up my dead note, my silicon, I'll do my A and my B and my dead note to the same skin tone.
Oh, this is really good that you're bringing this up, because that's what I was talking to these guys about, you know, is because I did the same thing. But someone had an experience here where wherever you were working, you didn't do it that way. It was like, was that you? Like, we won't mention where, but so you tinted the A, right? But you didn't tint the B at all. And it's like, well, how do you know how?
And you can do it. And I've heard people say, we combine the dead note with the A or something weird. It's like, why would you do that? It's like, because it saves, half a second off the... It doesn't make sense.
I just logically, I need to see that it's what I'm looking at there is going to...
Neill showed me a great method to know when you got enough of the pigment in there so that it's going to have the right amount of translucency. You guys probably already know this.
This is the dot on the stick.
This is the dot on the stick.
Yeah. So I like doing the A and the B. And the reason I'll do the A, B and the dead note, well, there's two things. One is it means I have to mix up the same skin tone 3 times. So that's twice, it's more than enough work. But if that's what you do, guess what you get really good at? So when you have to correct a makeup that's the wrong colour, you instantly see the difference because you're used to doing it more than you need to. That's a good thing to have. And second, the other thing is, if I change the dead note amount, so the nose is firmer than the pointy ears are firm, the neck's really, really soft, it doesn't matter how much dead note I add, it's the same colour. And even if it's not exactly the same, it's a combination of all three, it's close enough, and you can correct it with makeup. But it's a very good habit to get into. I'm not looking to speed it up. I want to be better at mixing skin tones. I might save 15 minutes by making my A more opaque, but I don't know if it's the right amount of too much opaque until I mix my clear B and my clear dead note in. And then what if the neck's softer, I've got more dead note in it, so it's more translucent. So it just makes sense to me. I'd rather do the work. I'm not looking to cut corners. I want it to be really fucking good. Same as if you're landing a plane in a heavy crosswind. It'd be really nice to know your pilot didn't skip class, didn't sleep with the teacher. You'd rather they were really, really, really fucking good at what they do. Because at some point, someone's going to depend on that. And it might be you that depends on yourself. And you won't be glad that you shaved a few corners off. You'll be glad that you put the effort in. And it takes time. And every fucking great hair I learned, I will stand by it.
Just a point just to make on that, it's also very much about the context, isn't it, of the work. So a friend of mine who was a student of mine many years ago, who's now made costumes for the Chemical Brothers, Kate Table. So she was showing her costumes in a gallery, and in a gallery you're looking closely at the joins, and there's a kind of conversation like, she was almost apologising to me, doing really well, that doesn't mean me, about the joins and the level of finish, and we had a conversation about, well, these aren't really for a gallery, these are costumes that were designed for dance for the Chemical Brothers music video.
Yeah.
So they're all in plastizote, and there's lots of fixes on the shoot. But actually, they're perfect for what they needed to be, which was to be performed in dance on that video. Yeah. So in that context, they were perfect. And in the gallery, the kind of rather kind of hasty joining, that's not a problem because you're now looking at prop from a thing that happened. In and of itself, it's not a sculpture, it's a different thing. Yeah. So the context and the use is the key thing. This has to move,
we had this conversation in Stu's shop last night about collectors, prop pieces for collectors need to be much more super detailed than actual screen used pieces because the softness of elements, there's movement, you're not scrutinizing it up close in your hands. You know, I was a standby painter on Charles Bronson's last movie, and we had to make it was called Kinjite, forbidden subject. So it's a horrible movie. Canon Films.
Canon Films.
It was a horrible movie. But we had to build this reception desk in the lobby of this apartment complex to make it look like it was made out of marble, and it was just painted plywood that we used a feather to do the veining in, and it looked like painted plywood, but on film it looked like a freaking marble reception desk. Yeah. But my main gig on that was there was a scene where Bronson throws this bad guy off a balcony, off a sixth-floor balcony into a swimming pool. But the balcony didn't extend out over the swimming pool, so the art director set guys built this deck extension on this apartment balcony, and I had to hang in a repeller harness upside down under this deck 6 floors above the swimming pool to paint it. And my hands were sweating so bad I was afraid I was going to drop the paintbrush. It was horrible. I hated it.
What a job!
Hated it.
Yeah, so glamour.
You had one, didn't you? I'm sorry.
I did. Sorry. I know you talked about AI earlier, but I was curious because I had seen that for Into the Spider-Verse 2, the animation team for them made like a set of rules and then fed that in like an in-house AI to fill in the in-between frames for all their animations. So instead of hand doing smear frames, they gave it rules and was like filled it in and then just did touch-ups afterwards. So I guess my question is really just we're curious about how you think AI as a tool will affect the industry if people maybe use like AI aging technology to help aging prosthetics or things like that.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if it shows up at some point doing that. Right now, I think we're safe from that happening because AI still doesn't really know what humans look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the long-term prospect is, I think it will displace jobs, but it won't really replace jobs, if you know what I mean. It's really hard to predict, particularly in the practical effects industry, exactly where AI will have the most impact.
It may wind up becoming part of somebody else's job description in addition to what they're already doing.
Yeah, that's right. I think at the moment, I think it's a big threat for concept artists. But the impact it has in our industry, I don't know.
No, I think it'll have an effect early on, but I think in the long term it will level out. Because
the
thing
I
is,
sort of think that too.
If it's something that anyone can do, or it relieves the human from the creative input, then it's not a job. Like if you could hit a key and make a movie, who's going to watch that movie? Because you could make your own. That's right. Why would you bother watching somebody else's? So at which point, now nobody's watching anything because instead your entertainment is the creation of something that no one's going to watch. Do you know what I mean? So that then becomes a zero-sum game. What's the point? Whereas we will watch people run and cheer the winner, and we hate it when we find out that we're taking steroids. Yeah. Because we want to see what a human being can do. Yeah. And you will enjoy doing it. And for me, it's the pursuit of doing it. It's the competence of being able to do something. And it's kind of like, I almost think that's more important than what it's for in a way. So if it replaces everything in the short term, it just means, okay, we don't have to pay for stuff anymore. But it's like, but no one's watching it.
I totally agree with that. It's creativity is a very human pursuit. And look, people still draw with pencil. Like with all the digital tools that there are, people still draw with pencil and do it beautifully and enjoy it, and people pay for it. And it's like, it's all of these sort of things that I think are going to go away. But yeah, I think you're quite right. There's still a sort of human element to it. And also I think from a production point of view, they're not going to suddenly start hiring production coordinators to do art because we have art generative tools. Artists are still going to be employed to do that work. And I think there's the element of art direction as well. Currently, if you're creating any imagery in AI, you really need a lot of art direction to panel beat it into something suitable for a particular style or story.
To know how to input the correct keywords to have the AI generate what you want them to create. So it's not.
I think you're right. I don't think it's.
I think producers are the easiest people to replace. If you can make something yourself,
Yeah.
and you can completely bypass the studio system and throw it up on YouTube,
Yeah, that's right.
well, they're the ones you should worry.
Brad Greenwood is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, Falmouth is so fortunate to have him.
Yeah.
And the students, I'm sure they realize what a gift they have to not only have Brad Greenwood as the #1 tutor for the program, but frickin' Neill Gorton as well.
Yeah, it's quite a powerful combination, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's why they churn out such good stuff as well. And just the whole mood of everything, like Neil was saying well, you hear this in the part 2, but he was saying about, how they'll start with the basic materials, clay and a plaster mold, just start from the basics and get that right, because you can get very hung up on trying to go for top end materials. It's not necessarily going to do you any favors if you don't know what you're doing with them. So you've got to start from the ground up.
Yeah. Like we've been saying, start small, just a latex nose.
Yeah. And just scale up from there.
And do that to the point where you put that latex nose on somebody and somebody else comes in and looks at it and doesn't know that you've done anything at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And just wrap it up. So it's
that's when I back in the visual effects days, the best compliment somebody could give us if we'd show them a shot that we had just finished compositing and they can't tell what we've done. That's the greatest compliment you can give somebody.
Yeah, but it's one of the reasons why sometimes the stuff isn't appreciated, because I remember the chat we had with Brad Looks. Remember that one from a few years back, and he was saying about how he did this corrective makeup on an actress, and it was just like, people were like seeing her all done and dusted and wondering why it took so long. It's like, you have no idea. If you saw without the makeup, it'd be like all these blotches in the skin and everything. It's like, that's not how they look. It's like, this is the thing. If you do such a good job, you have to sort of sometimes defend what it is you do because it's invisible. And it's like...
Yeah, well, I think that's why Dick Smith wasn't nominated for The Exorcist, because nobody realized that Max von Sydow was wearing makeup,
which is, it was such an incredible makeup. And especially
because he was I think he was 40 or 45 when they made that. And if you look at pictures of Max von Sydow when he was actually the age he was playing Father Marin, makeup almost identical.
Yeah, I'll put some pictures up of that, because it's one of those things where Dick was doing those kind of makeups at a time where you didn't typically see makeups like that. Prosthetics weren't typically used to create very realistic age makeups, like you were saying, the Jack Crabb makeup and Dustin Hoffman and these subtle, or the old Salieri makeup from Amadeus, is like,
which was actually
incredible.
His forehead was from a mold of Dick's own forehead.
Which goes to show, he was recasting and using reality to base things on even then, so
yeah.
It is lovely, and it's that whole vibe. It's just, realistic makeup's trying to couch it in reality. It's a masterful thing to do, because it means you're completely in control of the materials and the processes to get that. And that's why I think it's such a flex to be able to do those things. So make noses, man. Make good noses.
Make noses.
All right, we should probably wrap this up.
Nose.
I'm going to go and make myself a cup of tea, and then I'm going to go and get some dinner, and then have an early-ish night, because I'm just tired.
Yeah, but you're in a good mood, and I love that. I have been, since getting to England on the 14th of November and doing all the stuff that we did and hanging with V, which, I mean, that's a podcast in and of itself, just hanging out with the incomparable V Neill for a couple of days was fantastic.
Yeah.
I feel energized. I'm just so pumped about what it is we do. It's like I have a new lease on life.
Well, it was amazing, because we didn't stop. Like, every day was something. We were working or going traveling or talking to people. It was just full on all the time. And then it was seeing all that. What was it that we saw? I saw some of the Horacio Martinez's workspace and the stuff they were doing at Falmouth. All these little things were trickling through, which is why I had this thing like, I've got to sort my workshop out. And then that got you kind of all fired up. You were doing it, and we got to keep this momentum going, man. We got to keep this momentum going, where you just kind of, you know, you sit with your mess for so long, you get used to it, and then you kind of get shaken up when you go and see a different place in a different country or whatever, and it's like, man, I could do better than this. And you're like, I'm going to make the effort to do it, and I'm pleased I did. It was expensive to buy all that wood and insulation and stuff, and we would have a laugh, man. If you were around, we could have just been together, like doing Handyman Joe stuff, like, you know, putting up walls, and you know, it's tricky doing all that, but yeah, it's going to hopefully make for a much nicer workshop. So the next time we record, hopefully it will be in my workshop space with proper sound deadening and everything. Not that this hotel room is that bad, and these mics are working out well, but
yeah,
it's just, I wanted, like, you know, when you see Bruce Wayne, his little den, it's like that. It's like my child in a fucking womb. That's what's going on. I'm just trying my little den, surrounded by things I like. So that's what I'm trying to get to.
Fountain of youth, baby.
All right, dude. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you very much for your time and your kind attention. And let's do this again soon. We'll get part 2 wrapped up and out soon, and then get on to our next one. We've got to have a big mold making fest and try and keep things back on track, because I realize we've done a big splurge on digital stuff because of the presentation, but I don't want to lose track of the fact that we still like working with our hands and making things. So let's try and get some mold makers back in here and talk shop. There we go. All right, buddy.
All right. Have fun tomorrow.
I will, and I'll keep in touch, and I'll touch base with you again tomorrow and keep you up to date.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Take care of yourself.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Okay, I'll do the makeup.